This week, there was a massive blackout in Spain and Portugal on Monday. It's okay, no one panicked. Oh wait, I'm being told they did panic. There was a run on grocery stores and no one could remember how to do long division.
The UK's Labour government is pressing on with plans to build overhead power transmission lines, despite the fact they are unsightly and unpopular. Said the current Prime Minister, come on, we let Boris Johnson get away with that unsightly and unpopular haircut for years.
89% of people worldwide want their governments to do more on climate change, yet most think support is low. It's like how I think I'm good looking, and so does everyone else.
Protesters in the UK have begun mailing their old, worn-out, and unrecyclable clothing back to the CEOs of the companies they bought them from. I guess we better hope that the merchandise we sell in the Clean Energy merch store will last forever.
Well, maybe not forever, but all that and more in this week's edition of the Clean Energy Show. Brian, you world traveler, you. Where were you this week?
I was in California and saw a few Waymo driverless taxis driving around. Saw probably 4 or 5 of them while I was there.
Okay. That's not like San Francisco where you can't blink and not see one, but okay.
Yeah, I saw 4 or 5 of them and all driving around without a driver. There was one car where I started taking pictures of it, and then the people in the car started taking pictures of me and waving, and they seem to be having a really fun time in a driverless taxi.
Why, Brian Stockton, did you not take one? I don't understand. It's the first thing I would have done.
It would have been, I'd have to set up an account and everything. I didn't even think of it.
Yeah. Well, I would love to do that for our show and just get that going. What else did you see?
And then little pizza delivery bots, I saw 3 or 4 of those driving around the sidewalks.
Where were you when you saw those? Exactly. Like what part of
that? Was like Sunset Boulevard, Hollywood Boulevard.
Okay. So those are real, because I've been watching Everybody's Live with John Mulaney, which Netflix made him de-emphasize California, but I really liked it when he emphasized California, because he said, they don't think people hate California, people hate LA. So that's not nice. They probably go there, the people who claim they hate it. I don't know.
Sure.
But yeah, he has one as a special guest on his show. One of those, Samos, they call them Samos. They comes in because he thinks that's part of LA. So what did you think about them?
Yeah, they looked really cool, and I could tell that one seemed to be pizza delivery. It had like the name of a pizza place on the screen. So I'm not sure if they were all pizza delivery.
No, they're not. You can get like a protein bar, and some people do, or maybe a bag of Doritos if you're high. Like it'll seriously, it'll do that. And because of the relatively low cost of not having a human labor involved, or gasoline, you can get, I don't know how much it costs, but of course there's a lot of people with extra money and pharmaceutical and retail cannabis that are maybe ordering things. Did you find them a nuisance at all? Like there has been a bit of a pushback against street scooters. I mean, did you feel the same way about these?
No, I didn't think so. There was one person riding an electric bike way too fast on a sidewalk, so that bothered me.
Yeah.
But no, it seemed fine. And one of them had to do it like tricky navigation. Like there was a person kind of hanging out on the sidewalk, and it had to kind of go up slowly and then creep around the person and then around a tree and then kept going. So
people just
I was impressed by that. And, it's not like there's millions of them or anything, but yeah, I saw 3 or 4 while I was there, which seemed like a lot to me.
You could have ordered something. I don't know where's it going to though? Is it going to a residence? Is it going to an apartment building? I'll meet you downstairs. The app says your bot is here with your chocolate bar.
Yeah, presumably you have to meet it at your door. It's not gonna.
I assume they won't deliver cannabis or liquor. I assume.
I don't know.
But maybe one day once they have security on them, they will start making noise, I think, if you try. And when they get jammed on the set of the TV show on Netflix, John Mulaney's show, they have to have a team of people come and carry it away. But it's basically remote controlled, and it's kind of funny. It amuses him to no end. So anything else about LA before we move on?
No, I think that's about it.
Okay, you had a good time? Happy?
Yeah.
Wasn't too long? You were just the right amount of time and you're back home again?
Yeah, it's great. It's just a few days event.
Well, we have a new prime minister in Canada. We had an election last night, which is why I'm very tired, because I stayed up late and I woke up early and I didn't sleep well. So I may take a nap mid-show, but
Okay.
I'll use my mute button in case I snore. It is Mark Carney, who used to be the governor of the Bank of Canada and the governor of Bank of England, right? And yeah, he wrote a book once. He's kind of this conservative, fiscally conservative person somewhat, with social conservative values. So he once wrote in his memoir to keep oil in the ground, but now there's such panic in Canada because of the US sort of isolating us that even people like him are talking about pipelines again. I just hope if they make a pipeline that we're not paying for it, because it'll be completely on us. If I don't want to pay for any more pipelines. I'm not a curmudgeon old man who says don't use my tax for this and that, but it's a lot of money. What they want could be upwards of $1 trillion, and that would be just a total mistake if they're not in use. And pipelines would have to bulldoze over indigenous lands, and that's just not going to go over well. And there's going to be lots of pushback from Quebec, which is a province that, yeah, it was a weird election, Brian. I have to tell you, we have three main parties in Canada, and for the first time ever, they abandoned the smaller party for the other progressive party, and that's never happened before in my lifetime. I always expected it might, because things seemed urgent. Well, this time it really seemed urgent. Of course, the Conservatives did better than they ever have, and right now it's a minority government, if you're familiar with the parliamentary system, but I think it could turn into a majority. They went over a lot of the seats, and they're very close, and a lot of people voted. 7 million people in Canada out of, 38 or something? Not possible voters, but population as a total voted. I did. I voted on Easter Sunday during Easter dinner, and there was no one there. And it still took too long because everyone was nerdy. All the poll workers were trying to make themselves feel important, and it took too long. But yeah, it was a painless experience. A lot of people took advantage of that over the Easter weekend. But before he took over from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau as head of Canada's Liberal Party, Carney spent 5 years as the United Nations envoy on climate action, and finance. He helped found GFANZ, or Z, a global initiative to mobilize capital to decarbonize the economy, which he co-chaired with Bloomberg founder Michael Bloomberg. I didn't know all that, actually. I wasn't really paying attention. So, yeah. And another thing I'll mention is that the local Facebook group of Tesla owners, there was one guy with a Cybertruck who posted two incidents of people peeing on his Cybertruck one night outside an establishment. And there wasn't one person each time. It was multiple people each time. And he's like, please stop doing this. So I'm not surprised. I think there's a backlash against Cybertrucks even without, Musk's political stuff. At least this is what I'm hearing from my son, who's in touch with the male underworld.
Well, it's amplified now because it's a symbol of America as well. So people are very anti-America here in Canada right now.
Yeah. Well, I took the Bolt in because, remember, my hatch wasn't working, my Bolt EV. And yeah, it's going to be 3 weeks before they can find a part for it. So, but they think they know what's wrong, and they saw another one. But, usually when you have a problem with a car, you can Google it and find other people with the same problem, find a YouTube video how to fix it. It doesn't exist. It's weird. It doesn't exist. And I saw an Equinox EV, which is the bigger crossover, and I thought it was huge. Like, I know it's a lot bigger than the Bolt, but it seems excessive to me, because I was thinking about maybe that would be an okay thing. And my partner, she wants it because she takes kids around at work and loads car seats in and out and stuff like that. But it's too big. I think it would be nice to have a compromise in between the two. I think that would suit our family, as long as there's enough room in the back seat and everything's comfortable.
All right. So from The Guardian, I thought this was interesting because we have talked about overhead power lines quite a bit lately, especially due to the California wildfires. Overhead power lines, it's one of the big problems with them is if you're in a dry area, they can spark, wildfires. But the reason you don't do it typically is because it costs a lot more. So I thought this was interesting. The story from The Guardian puts some numbers to this. The Labour Party in the UK is currently in charge, and they're planning to press ahead with overhead power lines, which are often called pylons, those very, very large power structures that carry power. Labour has vowed to press ahead with its plans to build more pylons across England and Wales, a subject of local political division. As a report says, underground electricity cables are more than 4 times as expensive.
I did not know that.
Lines.
That's pretty significant. So they have to sort of horizontally drill under roads and things, and maybe they have to pay more for disrupting the land that they're digging up. But it seems like maybe it would pay for itself in the long run. I don't know. UK might be a different story. They're getting a lot of big storms, but we get a lot of thunderstorms in North America here, and that takes out power.
Now, it also says the maintenance is more expensive, which also makes sense because then you'd have to dig it up. But one would hope that they would be overall more reliable and maybe last longer. I don't know. But yeah, just 4.5 times more. And that, of course, depends on the terrain. There's going to be some places that are easier to dig than others. And there's places where it's even way more than 4.5 times the cost to do
That's really surprising to me. Because California is pushing ahead to do some of that, and it's...
Yeah, it almost seems like they have to in California just because of the wildfires.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big difference if you burn down a city because of your power line was, started a fire, and they often do, and they often have to shut them down as well when that costs them money. So
yeah, but there's a lot of opposition to the overhead lines, of course, because they can be quite unsightly. They can ruin some really nice vistas. Similar to offshore wind can be a problem sometimes. We'd all prefer probably not to have them, but it's certainly better than the alternative.
At least offshore wind, you can do it far enough so that you can barely see them or not even see them. We did a show once where we talked about how long you would have to go for different size turbines to not see them, either through atmosphere or through the horizon. And, sometimes those are doable.
Yeah. And of course, the other issue is they're going to need a lot of power lines quickly because they're trying to get off oil and gas, and that's going to just require more transmission lines. So it seems like it is probably the inevitable choice to go overhead because they're going to need a lot of them. They're going to need them fairly quickly, and that's the cheapest and fastest solution.
Huge traffic jams, people are being told not to drive unless it's absolutely necessary. Undergrounds have been evacuated in Madrid, the metro in Lisbon and Porto in Portugal have been suspended. Airports are affected.
Large areas of Spain and Portugal have been hit by a power outage. Cash machines are down. Traffic lights are not working.
We talked a lot about the importance of just a little bit of electricity in regions of Africa in recent shows, so I thought I would highlight, because this struck me quite a bit, that what it's like to not have power. The world, when your society depends on power, you don't think about how important it is to our society here in the developed world. So here's an example of how much we rely on electricity. A major power outage hit Spain and Portugal, parts of Portugal, on Monday, and it lasted for many hours and abruptly shut down daily activities. It halted trains. A lot of trains run on electricity in Europe. Subways, of course, run on electricity. Cut off traffic lights, which of course caused, massive chaos and congestion. Closed stores and canceled or delayed a lot of flights. Tough to do these things without electricity. Officials remained at a loss as to the cause at last report, so they haven't figured that out yet. The outage briefly affected the French power grid as well, so everything's connected, and they had to sort of get going again. But Brian, there was frantic stockpiling. I don't know why people panicked during a power outage and started thinking the world was ending or something. I mean, can you explain that? I don't know.
No, I mean, they happen semi-regularly where we live, but you always just assume it's going to come back on in an hour or two. So,
well, let's say our whole province of Saskatchewan, the power got cut, and that's possible, right? We've had big ones before. Would you start panic buying?
No, I don't think so.
No, well, they ran out
Yeah.
of water, and there's all kinds
Unless
of...
there was some other news report about, all the power stations had been bombed or something.
No, well, I don't know about that, but I don't know why people did this, but it's kind of odd because there was that big power outage in the late 90s in Toronto and the
Yep.
Pacific, or not, the northeast United States, rather.
Yeah, yeah.
And covered a lot of people and lasted, at least a day for some people, and 2 days, 3 days.
Yeah, I think a half day in Toronto.
Is that right? Well, it was nighttime too. I wish I was there for that. That would have been cool. Were you there for that?
I was there. Yeah, I had friends who were stuck on the subway, and one of the subways goes across the Don Valley, so it's like under a bridge.
That's not a good place to...
So they were stuck they stayed on the train for like an hour or two, and then they realized, okay, well, we got to get these people out of here. So they had to walk them, out of the train and then down the tracks to the other side.
Wow. Did you see any stars? Because in big cities, you can't see. It's part of nature that sort of gets kept from you.
I don't remember looking up at the sky at night, but...
Headline, Brian Stockton did not look up. Okay. The lack of access to information made a lot of people panic because, people are reliant on electricity for information. You don't have AM radios with batteries ready to go like you do in Tornado Alley.
People used to have like a wind-up cranked radio to make sure you were connected.
I'm sure we had a couple of them. We've sort of picked them up from garage sales or from people giving them away. But yeah, one day it might be handy. And those things create lights too. I remember using one for light once when I was desperate. I forget why. Yeah, but water was snatched up in stores. I don't know why. I mean, the taps still worked, didn't they? Soon after the electricity was cut, long lines started to form outside ATMs. Why? Because you can't pay for anything if you don't have cash. So I don't know if the ATMs were working, but apparently they must have been. I don't know if there was a battery in them or something, or a backup generator in the buildings that they were in. Traffic lights and electric road signs stopped working. The Spanish Traffic Authority noted on X, asking residents to avoid driving as much as possible, though many could not get access to that message because it was electronic.
Yeah.
So, there were scenes of chaos in Madrid with no traffic lights working. Vehicles blocked the city's avenues, and the traffic police improvised, trying to do their best to keep things moving. By late afternoon, commuters had ditched their vehicles, choosing instead to walk away, like some sort of REM video. They just started walking. And train passengers stranded for hours in the middle of nowhere had climbed down from their carriages and were sitting beside the tracks in the sunshine waiting to be rescued. In the city of Valencia, emergency vehicle services had been rescuing people from elevators all day. I'd hate to be that person.
Oh, it'd be terrible.
I would hate to be that person because at what point do you go pee? I mean, just say, I can't hold it any longer. I'm sorry. It's happening. And so by 9 p.m., the Valencia City Council announced on social media that everyone who had been trapped in elevators had been freed. That's a long time, hours and hours, a whole workday stuck in an elevator, as long as that. Geez, if I was younger, man, I'd probably climb out and start. Yeah, but you don't want to do that because the power could come on and So hospitals in Spain had to run on generators, and Portuguese banks and schools shut their doors. Trains and subways, of course, came to a stop. Grocery stores were bare, with some adding up bills by hand using paper and pen, adding up the bills because they could not do it it's like, before, it's like the Old West or something, like it's...
Well,
that's how important electricity is.
I was in some store recently where the power was on, but there was something with their computer payment system, and they, and they wouldn't take cash because they couldn't keep track of the inventory properly. So without the, electronic cash machines, they wouldn't sell you anything.
Yeah. I've been in that situation as well. And I always wondered why, and that's why. But yeah, they just escort you out of the store and you think, crap, I spent an hour in the store. I finally decided what I want. And now I have to leave. Yeah, 35,000 passengers have been trapped on about 100 trains. That's a lot of people trapped on trains. Joe Mert, a geology professor at the University of Florida, was celebrating his 30th anniversary with his wife, Michelle, but the train that they were on stopped suddenly on the tracks in a rural area somewhere between Madrid and Valencia. he said in a phone interview. After 3 hours, he said the dining cart was down to just beer and a few soft drinks. "We are out of water," Mr. Meert, 67, said as he watched some riders step down off the train and walk towards a tractor in a field where a farmer was delivering water, which is very nice of them. The train staff was walking from car to car delivering the news since they could not communicate electronically. So everything in society breaks down without electricity.
Yeah, what typically happens around here, we'll have a power outage some afternoon, and I'll immediately go to my cell phone, and we always still have cellular coverage. I've never had it where the home power was down and we lost cellular coverage. So I'm connected back to the internet within 30 seconds using cellular, but it sounds like in this situation, it was everything.
So if the whole area went down and you were outside of any cell phone coverage, you may not have cell phone. I read once that there's batteries in cell phone towers, but they only last for a few hours, a few short hours. And I could be wrong. If anyone knows, come talk to us. It's time for some listener mail, Brian.
Yeah, last week we heard from John in Japan, who's a member of government there, but he came from a small city in Saskatchewan called Swift Current, and that got us wondering about our listener Bob, who's also from Swift Current. We had mentioned him. He was having a little problems with his Hyundai electric vehicle, and he heard us talking about him, and he wrote in this week and says, "Good morning. Just listening to the podcast and heard you read John's letter. John and I actually graduated from high school together. Small world." And he also says his Hyundai Ioniq 5 is all working. Everything's good now.
Well, that's good. That's good to hear. And I have another letter here from Eric. It says, "Good afternoon, James and Brian." How's he know it's afternoon? It's not. You guessed wrong, Eric. "Hope all is well with you and yours. I hope you know I love your show and love you guys also, but I have a minor bone to pick with you about EV range." So he's buttering us up before the criticism. You see how that works? "I want to express my opinion that the only consideration about what constitutes adequate EV range should not be the size of James's bladder, which we just found out is small because I had a pee break in the middle of the show. It's not that small, but I'm trying to drink more water, Brian, and it affects me. And let me say, at the risk of providing too much information, that I have a small and getting smaller bladder. So I understand that. I bought a Model Y a couple years ago. That's from Tesla, the crossover SUV. I'm retired, and so I finally have time to ski. For the past several years, I have skied about 28 to 30 days a season. That sounds like fun, a good life. I don't have a place to stay in Tahoe. I think he's from the Bay Area, Eric. So I just day trip each time I ski, something I would probably do to save money. Also, my wife complains to me about stopping so much to charge when we go on long trips, like to Southern California. I bet there are plenty of husbands out there who aren't going to buy an EV simply because they don't want to give their wives, you call them partners. Well, we call them partners because Brian and I aren't actually married by ceremony. We have life partners, but we haven't done that. Although my partner would probably like to be married and put a ring on her finger because all of the women at her work have rings on their fingers. So it's a problem for me. I might have to do something about that. So that's another reason to complain, he says. I don't think that it's too much to ask the car makers to offer cars with the same range, real range, not the fake advertised Tesla range, as my Toyota Tundra. Another less rational reason to offer EVs with adequate range has to do with people's perception of EVs, and I agree with you, Eric. One example of what I'm talking about is the neighbor of mine. She believes strongly that we are causing global heating. She has gobs of money and can certainly afford to buy an EV, but won't, due to mostly because of the range issue. Yeah, the older people are, sometimes the harder they are to change their minds. I can understand that. I truly wish I could say to her that EVs now have the same range as an ICE vehicle, but I can't. Another neighbor has an EV, but she says she'll never give up her ICE vehicle because of the range issue. You know, there are, I'll interject here, there are like Lucid Air, and there are a few kicking around North America that you can buy with ridiculously long range.
Super long range, yep.
That would be certainly more than some ICE vehicles, if not many of them. Thanks again for all your hard work on this podcast, this very entertaining and informative podcast. And he's from California. Eric, thank you for writing us, Eric. I don't think we disagree as much as you think we do, because Brian and I, when we say something like you don't need range. We're talking about the future, what we know is coming down the line. We know 5-minute charging is coming because it exists, in real life in China, and it'll come here. So that changes the game a little bit. Your wife may not be so upset if you charge for 5 minutes, but I fully support you wanting an EV that has that range. I know there are different use case scenarios, and I do agree that it would allow for more EV adoption. It just probably isn't as necessary as most people think it is, including your neighbor.
It's more of a perception issue than a real issue. I can totally understand why people would think, oh, I'm going from this gas car that has, X amount of range, and then the EV, you look at the stat and it's way less. But of course, like 99% of the time, it's just not an issue because you just drive around town, you charge at home every night. It's just the occasional road trip. And of course, there are people who are, drive millions of miles a year, and maybe it's an issue for them. So, it's more of a perception thing, but, perception is a real issue. It will stop people if that's the perception.
Yeah, I do believe cars can be the same range as combustion vehicles. Certainly, a plug-in hybrid PHEV would be good for somebody who doesn't. And a lot of people, even in China, are going for those types of vehicles, maybe because of their perception. And in China, you're just like 200-300 kilometers of range in some of those PHEVs. And then you never use that gas engine unless you're going on a long trip. Now, in Eric's case, he could have probably had, in North America, they're around 100, 150, depends on the vehicle, maybe less even. But they're
the electric range.
The electric range of a plug-in hybrid, so that you can use it as an EV most of the time, and then and a lot of people don't know those exist, but it's basically an EV most of the time. And then when you do go to Tahoe, then it kicks in and you don't have to stop, generally speaking. But a lot of people will be okay with like 600 kilometers of range or 370 miles. Brian and I are, in our cases, would be fine. I'm even surviving on a lot less than that. But yeah, it's a pain in the butt. You got to force the family to, if I was going skiing 30 times a year, I wouldn't want to stop. But I, do one summer vacation and I don't mind taking it easy and stopping and charging even in our car. But there are, 1,000-kilometer range vehicles, 1,500-kilometer range vehicles. That's like 930 miles. They will make them for the people who want them. And I always tell people to buy the biggest battery they can. Now, I live in Canada, the coldest part of Canada, pretty much. Like, it gets down to minus 40 here, so that's hard on the batteries. Now, having said that, there's more batteries that are coming. CATL was just testing batteries at the Shanghai Auto Show. They had the battery at minus 40 degrees on display, showing that it still had its power. And they took more power to keep it at minus 40, I'm sure, than what was necessary. But they were demonstrating that works. So even in our use case scenario, which is rare compared to most of the world, we will still have a solution for that. So a lot of times when we talk on the show, we know what's coming. And, generally we talk in the terms of not going out and buying an EV today, but in terms of global adoption of electrified vehicles. We know that all these problems, any problem you can think of, Eric, is solved. Your problem solved, because China will have cars that are 1,000 or 1,500 kilometers, which seems incredibly excessive to us because you have to carry that around all the time. So you're going to pay more for your electricity. But if that's what does it for you, then fine. Plus, you also have to buy a big battery because batteries degrade. Over time, you might lose 10% in 5 years. You might lose even 15% in some batteries. That's getting better as well. So, but at least you don't have to worry about it. So I say, if you buy the biggest battery, when I give people advice, I say, buy the biggest battery you can, and you won't be sorry. And that's usually the case. But we live in a cold climate.
Yeah. And some of the solid state batteries that are coming out look like they're going to be a lot lighter. So carrying around the weight of a 1,000-kilometer range car, if the battery is, say, 40% lighter, is not going to be as much of an issue. But yeah, it reminds me of, televisions. TVs are getting so big now, and they're getting so cheap. And so if anybody ever asks me, what size television should I get? I always say, get the biggest one you can afford. Like it's the same thing with cars. Get the biggest battery you can afford. Get the biggest TV you can afford. There's no such thing as a TV that's too big, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and they are becoming as big as walls. I went to Walmart for the first time in a long time the other day, And I was kind of curious because my wife was looking for something in the electronics department. And sure enough, there were 65-inch TVs there. And I was kind of curious what the biggest one that they carried was, but that happened to be it. I'm sure it's larger in the States.
Yeah, no, there's now TVs 100 inches and more. But the problem is then you can't get them in your house. Like there's no way I could get a 100-inch TV into my home theater in the basement. And it's a problem for reviewers because I sometimes read, tech reviewers. And they're like, yeah, I wanted to review this 100-inch television, but I do all the reviews in my house and there was no way I could get it in my house.
The Chevrolet Silverado EV, which Eric could go buy if he wanted to, has about a 500-mile range or 792 kilometers. So
that's really good.
Yeah, I noticed that because, pickup truck is, once you have a load or you're towing, it goes down greatly. So that's the reason why they've increased that so much. And people, I watched one local person here who was very happy with his Silverado. He'd had a Tesla before, but and living in this cold climate, he occasionally ran into problems with range. And yeah, he said the Silverado is it's perfect. It solves everything. Now, maybe you don't need that much range if you're not towing in a warmer climate. Maybe you do, or maybe you want it. But it's there. I mean, it is there. It's not ubiquitous, but we're starting to see cases of longer range batteries. So I just looked that one up while you were talking. Yeah, but generally, if you stop for after 4 hours of driving for a 10-minute charge, and I can see a car that can make it to Tahoe just with that and a lot of backup range, and then you charge at Tahoe because I assume you're spending the day there. I don't know how long you're spending there, but ski resorts are starting to have chargers, level 2 chargers. I was thinking if you're there for like 3 hours, you could have like a 25 kilowatt hour DC fast charger, because I know there was a few of those out in British Columbia with the local power company. And I thought it's kind of a weird area, 25 kilowatt hour charging. Maybe it's out of date technology, but I thought it's a good use case maybe for like a grocery store or other places that you might spend a couple of hours, or certainly a ski resort. So, but then a high level 2, like level 2 can charge up to 20 kilowatts in some cases, depending on the car. And for a commercial level 2 charger, that would probably do you too for in 3 or 4 or 5 hours of being there. You would charge up and then you can go home, and maybe it'd be less expensive than DC fast charging as well because it's a slower charge rate. So that's something to think about. Yeah, I just, I know that there's a lot of stuff coming. We kind of speak in terms of the best that is available, and we know what's coming and the problems in the challenges and the perceptions. Now, not everybody's going to, the Silverado is pretty darn expensive because it has a bloody big battery and it's a big vehicle, but it might be good for what Eric does, or people like Eric if they can afford it.
Yeah, we're still kind of in the early adopter phase here in North America, unfortunately, especially where we live. You really kind of have to be an early adopter to get over all of these perceptions about possible range and so forth. All right, well, thanks for the emails, everyone. You can send us an email at cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. You can leave a voicemail at speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow, and you can join the Patreon page where you can leave a comment on our posts and get in touch with us there. All right, so from The Guardian, mail-in clothing protests. We have talked a little bit on the show about the problems around fast fashion. The clothing industry has really changed a lot in the last couple of decades. And I remember hearing the statistics. It's like people used to buy a shirt and, keep it for 10 or 15 years. And now people buy a shirt and they keep it for a year or less sometimes. Like we're just going through an enormous amount of new clothing, and it's coming out rapidly in stores, fast fashion, and people are going and buying the latest fashion. I try and stick with, classic designs that can last, that,
Yes.
Hopefully you can buy it now and keep wearing it. And I also try and stick to 100% cotton, because anything else is plastic, and, it's just not, you put it in the landfill, it's not going to degrade for thousands of years.
When I had young kids, I would buy from Walmart clothes, and I had to learn that you get what you pay for, that if you pay, twice as much, it'll last 4 times as long or something like that. Like I bought a pair of sweatpants there for lounging around the house and doing podcasting in. They lasted for 2 washes. The Walmart sweatpants. Now, I once had a pair of Reebok branded sweatpants that were a bit more, 50% more. They're still good from Walmart. They happen to be from Walmart as well. But yeah, it was, you gotta do that because it's a waste. Kind of Walmarts are the bad, and some grocery stores sell cheap clothing as well. But yeah, it's not worth it.
Yeah, so getting back to the Guardian story here, in February, a threadbare polycotton bedsheet landed on the desk of Simon Roberts, CEO of Sainsbury's. This is a UK retailer. A protest by post, it had been sent by Sheffield-based designer, maker, and eco-activist Wendy Ward. And she says in the letter, I purchased this from Sainsbury's at least 10 years ago, she wrote in the accompanying letter. It has served me well. However, I have no sustainable options available for what I should do with it. Beyond repair, it was too damaged to donate to a charity shop, she explained. She couldn't compost it as it had been blended with polyester, and she couldn't repurpose it as cleaning cloths as being polycotton, it wasn't absorbent. She added, I don't want to put it into a textile recycling collection as the likelihood is that it will be shipped overseas or incinerated and not recycled. Ward qualified her assertions with links to respected sources. As a sustainable fashion PhD student, she is well informed on such matters. The only action I can personally take, she continued, is to put it into my general waste bin. I don't want to do this as in Sheffield, all general waste is incinerated as energy recovery, which seems a little bit alarming to me. This isn't a sustainable option as such processes have been shown to be as damaging to local air pollution as burning coal. So she concluded, as Sainsbury's is responsible for designing and manufacturing this product, making decisions to use polycotton with no consideration for what could be done once it reaches its end of life, I have decided to return it to you. I would really love to hear what you decide to do with it. And so she posted this to her 20,000 Instagram followers as well. And so this has sparked a bit of a, protest of other people doing the same thing, mailing in their clothing to the CEOs of these companies, because it's with this fast fashion thing, it's not like we have local charity shops where you can donate stuff, but apparently, a lot of it just does go in the trash.
If you donate something from Walmart, they'll just throw it out in a lot of cases because people don't desire it if it's not brand name or, decent quality. Yeah, it fits like terrible too. They fit terrible.
Yeah. And now these charity shops, they have to spend a lot of money just disposing of all this stuff that they get that they can't do anything with. So it's adding costs to them as well. And I always do consider it. We give stuff to our local charity shop and you always have to make that decision. It's like, okay, is this thing good enough that they're actually going to take it and resell it, or should I just throw it in the trash?
Yeah, my partner does that. And I know that they're going to throw it in the garbage anyway, but it's like, it's better if they do it because I won't feel guilty. That's her thinking on that issue.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense because it's more work for the charity to do that sort of thing. Yeah. We do turn them into rags. You ever do that a little bit?
Yes. Yes, we definitely do that.
It's time for the lightning round.
The Lightning Round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy and transportation.
From Bloomberg, scientists have developed a method to quantify the climate damages caused by individual oil and gas companies, which could be used as evidence in court. The method, described in a paper published in Nature, uses computer modeling to simulate 2 scenarios, one with and one without a company's greenhouse gas emissions, to estimate the impact on global temperature and local heat waves. The study's authors claim that their method can be used to estimate the impacts of any source of emissions on any instance of harm, and could be a key tool in climate lawsuits, which we love here on the show, Brian, you know that, which will have been multiplying around the world in recent years, and now this is going to give them more ammunition. I just hope they don't come after us.
Yeah.
It's cloudy today.
And I hope people don't mail in their clean energy store merch to us.
You know, last week, weren't we talking about snow? Wasn't that last week we were just talking about snow that we had?
I think it snowed last week, yeah.
And the forecast for this Saturday was like 32 or like approaching 90 degrees. It's
32 Celsius,
That's the world we live in. It's crazy.
Oh, and by the way, I'm wearing my VistaVision T-shirt that I got from the TCM Film Festival.
That is a hipster shirt right there. That is definitely hipster level. You should have bought several.
You know,
is it good?
It's kind of thin, and it's cotton, but I prefer the thicker cotton. It lasts longer, but it's hard to get. Cotton must have gone up in price or something because it's harder to get good, like high quality thick cotton anymore. It seems.
Okay. New York lawmakers are trying to shut down Tesla stores. See, some states you have to get by regulations that say you have to have a dealership, right?
Yeah, there was these laws passed many decades ago to stop auto companies from having a monopoly. It's sort of like movie theaters are the same way. Movie theaters were once owned by the movie studios, and they were broken up many years ago. So yeah, it was a law that made sense at the time. And Tesla has gone through this many times in many states, and I think they've pretty much solved all the cases, and they can direct sell, I think, almost anywhere in the U.S., but now it's cropping back up again in New York.
Yeah, the thing is, New York would be not the people you would expect to oppose such a thing, so this seems to be a political pushback against what's going on in the U.S. government. Yeah, that story's on electric. From Clean Technica, Waymo already has 22% of the rideshare market in San Francisco.
Wow.
And they had a little piece on saying, you can't go anywhere in San Francisco without seeing a Waymo. So that's actually good advertising because that builds up confidence that, well, I see people using this product.
Yeah.
Now, if you had say Tesla's worked, you wouldn't know they were a rideshare necessarily. They wouldn't stand out. These stand out because they got huge sensors on them. LiDAR. And so it's kind of like a good advertisement for them. 28 trillion, that's how much in climate warming disasters that scientists say 111 companies have caused us. 111 companies have cost us $28 trillion in climate damage. That's a new study. That can be found in Euronews. Savor, a California-based startup, is creating butter and other fats using methane captured from coal mining or natural gas drilling. Do I want my butter to come from that? I don't know. And plans to offer these products, it's kind of like drinking your urine on on the space station. You know it's okay, but it doesn't have an appetizing feel. They plan to offer these products in American restaurants and bakeries in the coming months, so that's not too far off. Trump is destroying the main U.S. federal agency that finances new nuclear projects. Conservative pro-nuke groups are furious about it. A lot of his supporters support nuclear power because it's not woke, like wind and solar.
Sure.
Meanwhile, like clockwork, China has approved 10 more nuclear reactors, all in one fell swoop. They kind of do that every year. This is the fourth in a row Chinese regulators have kept their promise to build 8 to 10 units a year. Last year, it was 11, actually. A new 1.5 megawatt DC fast charger by Huawei, designed primarily for electric trucks, but not necessarily exclusively for them, has been unveiled, and it can charge a truck in 15 minutes. A big truck in 15 minutes. On the way to Tahoe, you just stop with your semi. Maybe Eric could buy a semi and take his house with him. I don't know. Seems like an option. Japan's emissions fall to a record low in the fiscal year 2023. That's good news. Spain hits its first weekday where renewables met 100% of their electricity demand. That was before the power outage.
That was before the power outage, yeah.
But it wasn't
any connection?
It wasn't the fault of it, though. We don't have no fault. Okay. Yeah, you can see that story in PV Magazine. And finally this week, this is from The Guardian, the world wants action on climate change according to new global research. Global support, well, it's 89% of people worldwide want their governments to do more in climate action. That would have to include people of all political stripes then, Brian. Except for maybe the 10% that work in the oil and gas industry. Yet many wrongly believe that the support for such climate action is low. The spiral of science, the misperception leads to a silent majority suppressing public pressure and slowing climate progress. When participants learned about the true high support for climate action, Their willingness to donate to climate causes actually increased. A survey of 130,000 people in 125 countries showed overwhelming support even in major polluters like China and petrostates like Saudi Arabia. People are more likely to act when they believe others are also acting. Correcting misperceptions could trigger a social tipping point, they feel. Politicians underestimate public support for climate action. That's too bad because we know that they're not doing enough, especially where we are and in North America as a whole, influencing weak policy responses. Multiple global studies confirm deep and genuine public desire for stronger climate action, fossil fuel-driven disinformation campaigns, and human psychology contribute to the misunderstanding of public sentiment. Experts stress that sharing accurate information about widespread support can break the silence and accelerate climate efforts. And The Guardian itself is joining forces with dozens of newsrooms worldwide for a special initiative called the 89% Project. That's the 89% that approve of climate action. And the project is designed to amplify the fact that a large global majority supports climate action to help break the spiral of silence where people mistakenly think that they are in the majority. The 89% Project is part of a broader global journalism collaboration called Covering Climate Now. That's very interesting to me, and it's good to see.
Yeah, that's a great place to end the show on some good news. Again, contact us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. We're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Blue Sky. And once again, please check out that Patreon page for all of our posts there, and that link is in the show notes.
As always, thank you to our Clean Club executive members, Green Ambassador Brett Routley, and everyone who supports us on Patreon or PayPal, and you make the show possible. The links are there in your show notes. We'll see you again in 7 short days.
See you next week.
The Clean Energy Show.